All right, welcome to the AnimeCon 1991 30 Years Later panel. I'm Robert Napton. Back then, I was at a company called Books Nippan, US Renditions. I later then went on to work at Ken Iyadomi's company, LA Hero, and then again at Bandai Entertainment. And currently, I'm SVP of Publishing at Legendary Comics, which is part of Legendary Entertainment. So I'm going to go in order that I see my panelists. First, Toshio Yoshida, who was founder and worked at Animag at the time, was also at the time working for US Renditions as a translator on our videos, then went on to VIZ Media, Bandai Entertainment, and currently is at the Pokemon Company.
Pokemon Company International.
Mike Tatsugawa, who is founder of the SPJA and was obviously involved heavily in AnimeCon 91 and was chairman of Anime Expo 92, the first Anime Expo. Ken Iyadomi, I believe the first executive ever to come from Japan with a very specific interest in creating a market for anime in America. Ken is really the pioneer from Japan who made that happen. He doesn't get enough credit for that, so I always like to say that.
Thank you.
He went on to form LA Hero and then was at Bandai Entertainment. Currently, he's at Sunrise with the coolest title ever, Executive Expert. And of course, David Riddick, who was my partner in crime at Books Nippan. He was co-founder of US Renditions. And that is our panel. Now, the first thing I want to say is the five of us do not represent everyone that could have possibly been invited to this panel. There's like a couple hundred people that could be on this panel speaking about AnimeCon 91 and Anime Expo 1992. One of the things I wanted to set up and talk about what was happening in anime fandom and conventions generally before AnimeCon 1991. For those of you who weren't around, hopefully there's some young people watching this, and for those of you who were around who might remember some of this as well. Anime was always a part of, starting in the 80s, a lot of conventions in terms of video rooms and things like that. I'm speaking as a Californian, and there are many other video rooms that were happening around the country. But those are the ones that I really remember were what was happening at Baycon. And then in Southern California, the CFO was doing a lot of conventions, San Diego Comic-Con primarily. So Baycon it was the one that really seems to me, and Mike and Toshi, you guys were in the Bay Area, so you can speak to this a little better. That seemed to be the real antecedent for AnimeCon 91. Most famously, I think, Torrance Smith published a program guide for the video room that ended up getting republished by Books Nippan.
You know, all of us who were fans at the time were kind of inspired by Animag, and so we can't dispute the role that Animag had in getting us all to be fans and finding out about it. So Toshi, you should lead off, and we'll build on that.
So Animag, some of you might remember Animag. It was like one of the first professional, semi-professional anime magazines to come out in the US. CFO had a newsletter they published. It was called Talk, and it was all just Xerox pages, and they were charging, I think, $3 for it. So you can get your listing, a collection of synopses.
I'll remind you, David was actually the editor of that before you go any further, Toshi.
Okay. But we looked at that and said, $3, we could do something better for the fans. And the first issue, we said we're going to have a color cover. We're going to have news from Japan. We're going to have, we're going to talk to VIZ back then. They had just released Area 88 and the Psychic Girl. We got a 8-page sample comic to be put into the first issue of Animag to just have manga in it. And we released it with a cover price of $250 to prove that we could do it. And it was just a bunch of anime fans getting together in Mike Ebert's apartment. Mike was our art director, one of the founders, and he's now over at Blizzard Entertainment, you know, doing the things he loves. But shout out to Mike. And yeah, I mean, we did what, 15 issues in total, and pretty much a majority, the editor-in-chief, my wife, then girlfriend Trish, went on to become the editor of Animerica at VIZ. So yeah, I guess we were at the start of it all, but it was things like the Bacon guide that said, that prompted CFO doing something similar. So we all sort of encouraged each other to create the industry for anime fans as it was back then.
We built on what you guys built on, and we pushed out the anime reference guide, which was a collection of synopses, and we did that in 91 and 92. And then we put out Anime, the Berkeley Journal of Japanese Animation in like 90, 92, 91, 92, 93. And eventually the interesting thing is we stopped because thanks to people like Bob and Dave, anime was finally starting to get subtitled and dubbed. So there was no longer a need for all these books that had synopses, because for once fans could kind of understand what they were watching, because most of us watched and had to guess what was going on based on what we were seeing.
Because I always felt the Bay Area was really known for the great publications, the Bacon book, Animag. Obviously, Torrance Smith went on to form Studio Proteus. In LA, the fandom was really geared around CFO, but also the companies that were in Los Angeles, like Books Nippan and Harmony Gold. You actually kind of made your reputation in Southern California fandom doing a translation of the Macross Do You Remember Love movie that you put out as a script. And that kind of led to you joining Books Nippan, and you were the editor of Jur Talk, and I never really realized that inspired Animag. So that was actually kind of shocking for me to hear. And I've known you guys for 30 years.
Jur Talk was the newsletter for CFO Gardena, which was a CFO chapter that I was heading in the late 80s. And as far as my feeling of what was going on in LA at that time, we had CFO. We had split off groups like the American Alliance for the Promotion of Japanese Animation, or Asia, the one that we were involved with, and of course a major hub of importing was Books Nippan. Northern California fans they were so far ahead as far as the creation of synopses and things like that. They were able to converse about Japanese animation at a level that I wanted to raise the conversation to. So when Torn came out with the Bacon guide, that was like a kind of a quantum leap forward, I felt. So I'm going to definitely tip my hat to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And as Mike, as you pointed out, the synopses books were such a big deal. It's hard to imagine now. But Ken, you really led the charge in doing subtitled anime.
Yeah, I think that was around 88-ish that I visited LA a couple of times. I think that's during that time maybe we first met you guys.
Yeah.
And we brought Wings of Oneamis, which was localized in totally American way, and everyone hated.
Right, as StarQuest.
Yeah, the opinions.
Yeah.
StarQuest.
I was there.
So it's actually my motivation was to bring Japanese animation as is, So, and also there had been I saw many rights issue was screwed up. American licensee, get the license but copyright and change name and become something else. So
Gainax and Torrance Smith, the late Torrance Smith, and General Products USA, which was Torrance Smith and Leia Hernandez. Gainax really was leading the charge on AnimeCon 1991. And it's so fascinating because even though we mentioned, San Diego Comic-Con, Yamato-Con, Bay-Con, these were American conventions and American fans doing anime rooms and anime events. But Gainax, a proper anime studio, was really leading the charge to do an event in the USA. And this is where you came in, and you can tell this history better.
That's basically the convergence of two different movements that were happening at the same time. So, you and Dave were active in CFO in the 70s and 80s. I started a club called Cal-Animage in the late 80s, and we're kind of almost the anti-CFO in the way that CFO was a very loosely knit organization. but and maybe a little bit of anime background is required here. The cost of a Japanese tape, if you wanted to buy one, was about $200 to buy the videotape. And then you'd have to hook up VCRs and daisy chain them and make copies of copies of copies of copies. And so distribution was very limited and the costs were very high. If anything, the biggest contribution you guys did was you made anime accessible. You could make it $20 and people could finally buy it and rent it. And because anime was so scarce in the late 80s and early 90s, we created a very close-knit group of clubs that wasn't as much focused on sharing synopses, but they were very focused on making subtitles, because the Amigas first came out and we could make early subtitled anime videotapes. So all the clubs work closely, very, very closely together. And because we worked so closely together, we were very structured. We had distribution systems and we're in regular contact with each other, which was very different from the way that CFO worked. And so because we're so organized, when Gainax says, hey, we want to kind of repeat what we did with Daikon and do a convention in the United States, they had the money and they had access to the guests. We as fans had the heart and the passion to make it work. Interestingly, for AnimeCon 91, the one thing we didn't have a lot of was experience. So the big thing that we did was we all volunteered at the Baycons in the late 80s just to get experience running science fiction conventions, so that experience could be utilized in AnimeCon 91. So AnimeCon 91 was the convergence of, licensing, access to Japanese guests from the Gainax side, experience and knowledge from the Baycon side, and then the passion, blood, sweat, and tears of the anime fans from the Cal-Animage and CA West side. So all these things kind of came together in a very unique way for the first AnimeCon.
It did feel like this huge convergence of kind of everybody and everything, Northern California, Southern California, people coming from all over.
It was every fan's dream, right? It's been what we were been waiting for years and years and years.
Yeah. Ken, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the Japan side as well.
Time, everyone was very young, Well, Gainax was a very, young company, and also, they are really interested in, doing a convention and stuff. Actually, they went to Minoru Takanashi. Then Takanashi-san asked me to visit Books Nippan, please go visit them, then talk about possibility, explore the anime business in the US. But
who's Takanashi-san? Sorry.
Isn't he the producer of Macross?
Yeah. He's a colleague, unfortunately he's passed away. But we joined the band at the same time, the same year. And we used to work together.
So there was this kind of young group, and you were part of that kind of saw just this opportunity in North America, and Gainax seemed to
and also back then in Japan, people had not so much interest, to the overseas market.
Right.
And US market was only good for the kids show, which has a merchandising. And in Japan, late 80s, many of the animation targeting the teenager, started happening because of the home video market, appeared. So, that's kind of gradually exported to outside of Japan. And, we hear some noise, but not really quite sure what's going on. So there was no business at all. So, but in a way, it's kind of easy to talk to anyone. I want to do business for US, and everyone was welcome, but please do, because there was a zero income back then. So
right.
Yeah.
Right.
And all the creators, it's compared to nowadays, so many young creative talent got the opportunity to like a very important role, such as like a directors or key animations or character design.
Mhm.
And like also we could do like things whatever we want to do. So that was a very good days.
Yeah, like Kawamori-san and Mikimoto-san, these guys were all very young,
Yeah, like Kawamori directed Macross movie. He was 20.
It's crazy. Yeah. And we were all really young. So on the receiving end of that. Dave, I want to just touch on briefly, and then we'll get into kind of the convention proper, because what Mike said about this convergence, it really triggered a lot of memories for me, because I remember in LA when we started hearing rumblings about AnimeCon, and we were both at Books Nippan with the late Kevin Seymour, who was our boss. Unfortunately, we're going to be talking about a lot of people who contributed greatly who are no longer with us.
Right.
But I remember we were like, that was the dream, right? When we were like,
absolutely,
because we were at San Diego Comic-Con, you and I together, actually, in 1985, when Carl Masick, also the late Carl Masick, unfortunately, did his Robotech panel. And that was like kind of phenomenal. Like there were a couple hundred people at the panel, and there was this excitement around Robotech and Japanese animation in general.
Mhm.
And you and I started talking like, yeah, it'd be great if there was a dedicated convention. And then we heard about AnimeCon happening, and we were like, this is going to be the tipping point. To us at the time, it seemed like the tipping point.
Right. Well, back at the end of '87, when I got hired by Kevin at Books Nippan, shortly after that, that's when we went to go see the Wings of Oniamis / StarQuest, and Bob, you were there.
Yeah.
And that was like that was before we had met Ken proper, but he was involved with that too. That was like a major turning point for us at Nippon, because for the first time we were one of the first times, at least in my time at Nippon, we made contact with the creative staff, anime staff from Japan. So we were able to meet like Ichiro Itano, we were able to meet Hiroyuki Yamaga, we were able to meet like a lot of the key people in Gainax. And Gainax, and I'm sure Bob will agree, that Gainax was a huge inspiration for us at US Renditions. I mean, watching the making of Wings of Oniamis thing, movie documentary, we were able to pick out the key players, and these are the people that we got to meet these people. And then by meeting Ken, that was like the perfect thing. And then also the late Torrance Smith introduced Robert and Kevin and I to Toshio Okada, and through him, Kenichi Sanada and a bunch of other people. And that was the ball actually rolling when things started happening. But I can't underemphasize that Ken was like the godsend for us, because I mean honestly, he was, and him, meeting him was the catalyst that propelled US Renditions forward and got the anime industry started. I think Robert and I and Kevin, we saw what it could be, but when we met Ken, someone who was of a like mind as us, that was amazing. And that facilitated so many things.
Prior to that, we all grew up, in the US, watching, Speed Racer and Battle of the Planets and Star Blazers, which I still love, and Robotech came and became kind of the biggest version of all that. Robotech kind of almost felt like it went mass media, but it really didn't. But it sort of felt like this culmination of the way anime had been done up to that point, which was to localize, and not just localize, but westernize. Like, oh, we have to edit it, we have to change the names to make it palatable for kids in America, which actually probably wasn't the case.
That was a key philosophy point of US Renditions, is that we didn't feel that it had to be westernized. We wanted to give it as accurate as possible. And eventually, with Carl Masick, he did Streamlined Pictures, which kind of started following that mindset as well. And then that, ADV and all the other companies that came afterwards, they kind of just took the ball and ran with it.
Yep,
from there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, we might have helped convert Carl.
I think so.
Carl
For the
was
record, I
really
want to
ahead
say,
of
I
his
think we
time.
did. I think we did.
What, Toshi? Yeah.
Carl was really, ahead of his time. I mean, the fact that he wanted to dub everything.
Yeah.
And of course,
Right.
even back then, for me, when I first started working for you guys, it's like, oh, no, it has to be in Japanese. Subtitles are the best. And of course, a few years later, when I started at VIZ working on Rama 1/2, it's like, no, dubbing is the only way to go.
Yeah.
But he was the founder who took a lot of the flack, was
Right.
the lightning rod for early dubs. And the fact that by the time we got around to dubbing everything, it was starting to be more readily accepted.
Right.
And now look at AnimeCons, not to jump forward much. It's like, if you look at the guest list, it's not Japanese guests, it's voice actors.
Right.
I'd
Voice
like to
actors
think we
have their
were
own-
at the forefront of creating that industry.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, Carl, God, just ahead of his time.
Yep. No.
And I'm glad he took all the flack for us.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a really interesting time. There was this convergence, as Mike said, and then it all started to come together to make AnimeCon 1991 happen. So Mike, I'm gonna go back to you to kind of dig into some of your memories.
We had a lot of Baycon staffers who want, we had been helping Baycon out with their anime room for years. So when we had our dream to do an anime convention, they agreed to staff AnimeCon, even though they weren't huge anime fans. But, I think after a while, and I know how it feels now, some people are not necessarily anime or sci-fi otaku as much as they're conventional otaku. They just love, doing conventions and bringing people together. And I think they felt that way. So they helped us out with our dream. So they handled a lot of the operational parts of it. Now, the biggest trick I think we had with AnimeCon was, the world was still pretty analog at the time. The Japanese were not using email yet. A lot of us at Berkeley, in Silicon Valley Bay Area, we had email accounts early in the late 80s, early 90s, but in Japan, they still were not using that to communicate with us. So a lot of that was communication between Torn Smith and Gynax, just to coordinate the guest logistics. So, we were always pivoting based on whatever announcements or whatever guidance Gynax wanted to give us. So for the most part, it was just kind of, dealing with the guests. And for the most part, since we were the fans, we were the ones plugged into the fan communities. So we would be the conduit. Back then we had early BBSs like Valley of the Wind, internet, Usenet like Rec Arts Anime, and we could send the announcements out there. And the interesting thing was, unlike traditional fandom, our generation of fandom, we're all at the universities. We're all young college students, but we're all wired because all the colleges had early internet and early email accounts. So we were able, even though anime is a remarkably small percentage of the population back in the early 90s, the fact that we could reach a good portion of them quickly all over the country meant that if we want to throw a big convention like this, we now had the ability to pull in fans from every university all over the country. And I think if we had done AnimeCon 91 like 2 years earlier, before we really had full internet access, and made it a purely local kind of convention, it would have been night and day as far as, who attended and whether it really showed that an AnimeCon is viable as its own standalone convention.
Gosh, that's fascinating. I mean, before email, it's hard to even remember. Like, did we just have to use the phone? How did anything get done?
Faxes.
You
A lot
were
of
faxing
faxes.
things to me all the time. You tried faxing artwork to me.
I
It's like,
did.
I can't use this artwork. It's faxed.
I'm really dating myself, but I had to be shown how to use the fax machine when I got my job at Books Nippan. I had never used the fax machine before. Wow.
I remember changing the thermal paper in
Oh
Marfa,
my
the
God.
Animag's fax number. It's like, why can't it come out on a regular printer paper?
And I didn't know fax paper disappeared, so I like lost a few documents that way. We're going way back, kids. Yeah, no, it's amazing. It's amazing anything got done in terms of logistics. I mean, everything is so much easier now. Gosh, it's crazy. So, you know, you had, I'm just looking at the program book off to the side here. You had quite an impressive guest list.
Of course, we had the wish list, but it's not like they're friends with Miyazaki and Rumiko Takahashi and Tezuka, and I'm sure we were asking for people who weren't alive anymore. So what we ended up with was people who were just strongly affiliated with them. And if you remember in 1991, the big show at the time was Nadia. It's on the cover of the program book. That was Sadamoto, that was Ano. Sonoda was already affiliated with Gainax. I think the only one who came who was kind of out of that loop was Mikimoto.
But he was like a super popular character designer, you know,
from the Macross,
Macross and some of the Gundams.
Oh yeah. Everyone wanted him, but he was the only one in which I didn't see how he was working on a Gainax project, so I wasn't sure how they managed to pull him in. But you know, Nadia was more than popular, so you know there was no problem getting like the brains behind it. And like Ken was saying, these were all up and coming rock stars in the industry, the next gen. And you know, this was before Evangelion. I mean, made them household names. So you know, it's kind of amazing they came and they were doing sketches for people. And I'm sure after Eva came out, people are like, "Oh my God, you got a sketch from Ano." So
I have a Gundam, head of a Gundam that Ano drew for me back in '91.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I have a sketch of King from Nadia that Ano did.
Oh, wow. I mean, we were all kind of in the pioneering days of the industry in America, but we were all still super fans. So Toshi and Dave, I know you feel the same way. Like this guest list was like, I couldn't wait to go just to meet these creators. I mean,
I was extremely excited about this convention. This was like literally a dream come true and the culmination of a lot of work.
Yeah.
You know, from the CFO days to the, you know, dealing with, you know, being a small niche at San Diego Comic-Con to having a con of this magnitude of our own. It's amazing.
I mean, there wasn't any Japanese shows that had a guest lineup like this.
Yeah, it was unprecedented.
You'd be lucky to get one of those people for some sort of premiere event, but to have one event where all of these people show up, it's crazy.
And I remember, Ken, you telling me it was very unusual to have something like Anime Expo. That really was.
Yeah. In
Like
Japan, there was like a comic kind of, you know, market, but there's no really, you know, interaction between like creators and fans. So, you know, I was pretty much surprised.
We had a whole history from Star Trek conventions where the actors and people would come of that kind of direct engagement. So I think that's just was kind of the way of US conventions.
Because of the, you know, like, you know, US convention treat, you know, like a designer very well. So I know that many of the, you know, designer who really loves to go, you know, visit the, you know, convention, you know.
Right.
Because we don't have that in Japan.
Right.
Yeah, and maybe it's important to point out that, you know, for the most part, and I honestly don't know what the arrangements Gainax made with each of these people was, but for the most part, AX has always pitched the trip to the convention as a vacation.
Oh,
So
that's right. Yeah.
You've got a busy schedule. Come over to the US for a week, do a couple of panels, do some autographs, then we'll take you to Disneyland. Or, you know, we can take you to a gun range if that's your thing. And to a lot of guests, that was really, really appealing. Plus, I guess they got to meet their fans, which they never do in Japan.
I have a picture of Mikimoto holding that 44 Magnum and that little smile he's got when he's holding it up.
Fun fact is that a lot of the GOH's would want to go to gun ranges because, you know,
You can't fire them in Japan.
They're
right?
always drawing it. They just had never
Yeah.
seen it. Experienced
Exactly.
it.
Also, I remember that, like it really the first officially licensed and subtitle released, home video was Gunbuster, which was from Gainax and directed by Anno.
Gunbuster came out 2 weeks before Maddox 01. So a footnote in history. Yeah, a lot of these companies are gone, but Robert Woodhead and Animag are still doing it. So good.
I mean,
good
we're
for
still
him.
around.
Yeah, we're here. We're
Yeah.
here. Books Nippan, some of these companies are gone. I've been sort of looking at the guest list and kind of the events for those days. Streamline Pictures had a panel. Torn was doing a panel. I know Fred Patton was there. I can't, the late Fred Patton, who was really the godfather of writing about anime in the U.S. before any of us, in the early and mid 70s. And I will correct you on one thing, Mike. Dave and I were in CFO in the 80s, not the 70s. We're not that old.
You're not that old. I'm
not
old.
yet. Not yet. So you had this amazing line of guests and panelists. This is gonna be the hard part of the panel, and to test our memories a little and talk about 1991, the kind of nuts and bolts of the convention proper. I have a cheat sheet, which is the program book. Thank goodness, because my memories are a little vague and a little bit more tied to 1992 for some reason. I remember more clearly, but there was a great lineup of panels. There was quite some things that made me laugh out loud. I just want to read from Sunday, September 1st, 1991, dubbing versus subtitling. Carl Masick of Streamline, Robert Woodhead and Michael House of Anime, Robert Napton and David Riddick of US Renditions, and John O'Donnell of Central Park Media will conduct a debate on the relative advantages and disadvantages of subtitling versus dubbing. So kids, this used to be a big point of conversation. That was one of the panels. There was Manabe-san and Sonoda-san did a panel on manga, which I wish I could remember. I mean, we're going back 30 years, folks, so bear with us. So anyone remember any panels or anything specifically about 91? Dave, go.
Yeah. The dealer's room was unlike any other dealer's room that had ever been assembled at that time. I mean, all the distributors and collectors, it was like a dream. That dealer's room was like a dream come true. And the fact that that General Products was there, that was just like the chef's kiss. It was amazing. I still reflect on that. And plus that, you could walk around. It was like a who's who of American fandom at that time. Everybody was there. I remember Dana Fong. I remember Leia Hernandez. Right, she was there. So a lot. It was like a who's who of the American fandom. That was there.
Patton, yeah.
Fred Patton. Then to talk about the panels, I think our panel, of course, was like a pivotal moment because some of us had never met each other face to face. So that was like the first time I met Robert Woodhead in person, and that panel was a major occurrence because we were able to talk about our different philosophies and things, and of course Carl had his unique perspective on things, but it was interesting. It was interesting. I remember the masquerade, or where people were able to cosplay from all over the country, and it was all based on
cosplay wasn't the term they used yet back then.
Yeah. It was like a masquerade, I think they called it back then.
Yeah,
that was
contest.
Really cool.
I have it here. That was one of my questions, so I'm glad you brought that up. But keep going. Yeah.
One of my favorite memories of that convention were two things. After the panel, I remember playing pool with Carl Masick and talking to him about like a lot of the flack that he would get. He was called like the anime antichrist and stuff, and all the stuff that people were always on him about for his early dubs. But we were able to talk in a really civilized way, and we'd been friends before then, but we were able to get our unique perspectives across in a civilized manner. That was kind of a cool conversation. But I think one of the best moments I had there, it didn't have anything to do so much with the other than meeting the guests from Japan. It was actually I don't know if Bob even remembers this, being with Mike in a room watching the final episodes of Nadia that we were able to watch. I thought that was really cool.
Oh.
Vaguely remember that.
Yeah, I sort of remember that too, and I seem to remember like all these grown men crying.
Yeah, right. I mean, it was kind of emotional. I remember that.
Because
So
they
that was-
Gynax brought the unaired episodes, right?
Yeah, they
Or
did.
something. Yeah. Oh wow. Gosh.
Yeah.
I
So
haven't
we were able
thought
to
of
watch.
that.
We were able to watch that. That was really like, to me, that was, that was kind of like, Northern California meets Southern California, and then also the world writ large. Like kind of like everybody had gotten together for this convention, and just watching those episodes, that was super cool to me, and that always stuck out in my head.
Wow. I completely forgot about that. I'm glad you
Yeah.
remembered.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Ken, do you remember anything specifically about 91?
I only remember like having a drink at the night every night.
Like a good Japanese businessman.
Yeah. Well, that's it's really in Japan, the convention, we don't have a like a convention like we're staying overnights, kind of. There's multiple day events, but people usually go and go home. So staying at the hotels and then like hanging around and having a party, lots of party. I just remember all those good memories. Yeah.
That's awesome.
I could remember part of me thinking I'm mightier than thou attitude about things, but when it came to meeting the Japanese guests, I turned into a typical fan. But I just had to happen to have a business card that says I work for an anime magazine in the US, and that gave us some access. And I remember getting, like I said, Anno, getting a signboard of Gundam from him was amazing. I got a Sonoda and Sadamoto, Nadia from Sadamoto, and all those art pieces, and that was just amazing. To have it on the home turf, not having to go to Japan for it, was just amazing. And my most vivid memories of everything is sitting in the cafeteria or public space where we were meeting with the guests and being able to have an interview, have them do signboards for us. That's the only real vivid thing I remember doing, because it was before I needed to do public speaking at all, like for VIZ, which I joined in 93. Trish joined in 92. So it was so early days. There's no I didn't really go to panels. We had reporters that went to all the panels, and now I regret it. I would have loved to see the sub versus dub debate, because it was before I even considered doing dubs as a career.
And just to throw out one stat, about 2,000 people showed up. So just, I know that doesn't sound like a lot now. That was huge then.
Was that the number for the first year?
Maybe it might have
it
been
was
higher.
much lower than that.
No, I think it was about 1,600.
Yeah, so I found an about 2,000 on the, so okay, 1,600. What's your perspective on how the day-to-day went?
I guess from my perspective, I share Toshi's feeling that I wish I had time for the panels and everything like that. But I guess at that point in my life, being really young and kind of having the stress of knowing that fans had been wanting this for so long, I just had the pressure of, I got to make sure this goes right. I got to make sure this happens again. I got to make sure, Gynax is happy. I got to, and throughout the whole thing, I didn't really get to enjoy it much. And we did have a lot of challenges just because things were lost in translation or miscommunicated between Gynax and us and some of the other parties involved. So we were kind of triaging that. But for the most part, my enjoyment of the convention was kind of reflected from the attendees, that I wouldn't walk into the panel, but I'd see the attendees coming out and talking about, oh my God, I can't believe I got to see him. And people who couldn't believe they got an autograph, and people who couldn't believe that they could watch a high quality version of an anime, just kind of, you know, seeing all those things. And another vivid memory I had was talking to one of my friends who became a very close friend, who's an exhibitor. He was saying he couldn't believe that he was making like $20,000 a day, which in 91 was a ton of money, but that people had been saving their whole lives to buy anime cells, and they'd never had a chance to buy them. So when for the first time they had an opportunity to buy this kind of stuff, money was just no objective at all, because it was never available before. And I even remember one guy, he was making anime style cells. So they weren't real production cells. He was just making them. And he was saying, I'm doing this myself. I'm not a Japanese artist. And people were giving him tons of money because that's the closest thing they got to an anime cell. And, you know, there's just this pent up demand for, you know, information, for product, for everything that had been happening for 20, 30, God knows how many years, that all got released all at once at this one place. And granted, AnimeCon 91 wasn't the first convention, but it was the first international convention where you brought all these people in from all over the world, and you brought in merchandise from all over the world. And that's where I think fundamentally the business model showed that it could work.
It's a really great point, because you reminded me of something very funny. Books Nippan, David and I were there, you know, with Books Nippan US Renditions. So we had a dual role. David and I were kind of assigned to do the panels, but we also worked the Books Nippan booth with our boss of the time, the late Kevin Seymour. And I remember at one point Kevin said, hey, you know, we didn't have cell phones, so he must have called me on my hotel room phone. He said, hey, come to my room. I want to show you something. And I opened the door. He opens the door, and on the bed, on the bed of Kevin's room in the Red Line is just this mound of cash. It's the most cash I think I've ever seen before or since. And he said, can you believe this?
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just like, you know, I mean, with all due respect, you know, it took you to like, is this a drug deal gone wrong? And it was amazing. It was, as Mike, you just said it so perfectly. It was amazing how people just came to spend, to buy. It was like this pent up thing just exploded. And it was definitely the most money Kevin had ever seen at a single convention, without question, for Books Nippan. And yeah, I'll never forget that. It was just amazing. And that
You
was
left out the part about him doing the whole Scrooge McDuck impression.
That's right. I forgot about that, actually. Yeah, Kevin had his quirks, but boy, he was happy about that. And it did prove to Books Nippan management, because when we came back with a bag of cash like that, they were like, oh wow, you know, there's really a market here. The fans really want to buy stuff. And I really think that contributed to the longevity of Books Nippan, for sure.
It did. One of the things that I would add to that, if I can piggyback, is that one of the reasons why the fans were buying so much stuff was because this was like, at the time when AnimeCon 91 happened, it seemed like this is like maybe like a once in a lifetime shot that people were going to get to buy this stuff like this. They're not looking towards the future that it would blow up and eventually become Anime Expo and all that. But that's why people were getting in while the getting was good, and buying all they could, because where else were you going to get all this stuff all in one place? It was unheard of.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, we were like, well, I may never see this again. I have to buy it now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There was a feeling of that. Absolutely.
Yeah. No, it's so true.
I want to just give a shout out to Toshio Okada, as being someone who kind of believed in the vision of what we were trying to do. He was such an inspiration and such a huge help. And I was really happy to meet him through Torrance Smith. And also, like I said, I really want to thank Ken here for helping us out so much with the start of US Renditions and really the start of the modern American anime industry. And he's here. And so I just really want to just say how much the English-speaking fans appreciate him, and
Thank you.
especially on a personal level. So I just want to say that.
And I'd like to share a real quick personal memory about Toshio Okada as well. I remember meeting him in Mike Ebert's apartment, where it was our Animag headquarters way back when. Toshio Okada looks at Trish and called her, you know, you're the Ota Queen. And she still just rides that.
Well, she
It's
is.
her gamer tag
I
or
agree.
whatever. And then she will fight anyone else in the anime fandom that claims they're the Ota Queen, saying, well, did Toshio Okada give you that title?
No, there's only one. It's Trish. I can say that.
So before we move on to 92, I just kind of want to, and again, maybe Mike, I'll lean on you for this, kind of pay tribute to Gainax and to the late Torrance Smith and kind of everything they did to make 91 happen. I mean, is it fair to say without that kind of connection and that kind of effort coming from Japan, it wouldn't have been, AnimeCon 91 wouldn't have been what it was?
Yeah, I think it would have happened sooner or later, but definitely nowhere near as early as like 92, 93. And we also have to pay tribute to John Mclaughlin, who was one of the founders of BayCon, because it was his expertise and his network of convention staffers that trained the first generation of anime convention staffers.
Absolutely. And the late Carl Masick, the late Kevin Seymour, unfortunately, Fred Patton, so many people we've lost in recent years that were all played a pivotal role, not only just building up to that convergence and that tipping point from 1985 to 1991 that made AnimeCon 91 possible. So it was a big success. I think fair to say everyone had a good time. The fans were happy. The guests seemed happy. The companies like ourselves were happy, and then it was no surprise that it was going to come back. It got rebranded as Anime Expo. And Mike, you kind of, this is when my memories get a little more vivid. You kind of assumed the role of chairman, and I remember having lots of conversations with you leading up to 1992. Ken, you had started LA Hero. So a lot changed, and David, you were definitely part of all the organizational elements leading up to 1992. Itoshi, you had started working at
Not yet. I wasn't quite yet at VIZ yet.
You weren't at VIZ, but you had done
Right. Bunch of
videos
bunch
for
of
US
USR's videos, and then helped out with some of the LA Hero ones.
Yep. Yeah, you and Trish translated Gunbuster 2 and 3 and Appleseed and Black Magic, or kind of the whole second wave of US Renditions videos, because we needed better translations, so thank you. So flash forward to 1 year later, 1992. Mike, as I recall more vividly, you had taken on kind of the role of chairman, and you were doing a lot to engage with the companies, and I remember having lots of conversations with you. Ken, you actually got more involved in 1992. I believe you helped bring Mikimoto back and Terasawa-san, because at the time LA Hero and US Renditions, I believe, were releasing Kabuto, his new anime OVA.
The whole transition to Anime Expo.
Yes.
What were the factors that made Gainax and their product arm, General Products, decide not to do an AnimeCon 92? Was it just not feasible after a year? What was the? I mean, I'm curious myself.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. Yeah,
so
perfect.
AnimeCon was successful because of a convergence of factors. So you had the fans, you had the staff, you had the business sides all kind of coming together at the same time. And although the convention was a critical success, the model was an unsustainable model. So one of the things was the cost of AnimeCon 91 was through the roof. I mean, and maybe this is kind of a unique trait of Gainax itself, because if anything, Gainax is known for putting together super high quality product. Sometimes not at the best price, but they take pride in what they do, and that's why they have so many critical successes as far as anime. The cost of AnimeCon 91 was extremely expensive. Like, even looking at the backgrounds behind us, they figured the silver foil would look very stylistic. So even though it cost a ton of extra money to put on a program book, we did it. And bringing over all the guests was a shock and awe that was amazing, but it was also very expensive. So the cost of AnimeCon 91 could not be repeated. But one of the things that we as fans paid attention to was the way that the conventions were run, because science fiction conventions, unless you're like a Star Trek convention, are run for a fraction of the cost. So all through the whole convention, we thought about how can we run this better and how can we run this cheaper. The other side of it was, a lot of us who were serious anime fans, we could see the rumblings in the operations of the convention, that since one business or a couple of businesses pretty much owned the convention, there was discussion of, oh, next year the theme of the convention will be this because we like this product, this is our next product. Oh, well, we don't want our competitors to be able to promote their products in the convention. And we were kind of like, in the long term, is this what the fans really want? Will it be like a creation con that's only going to support like one type of business? And all of us as fans, very idealistic fans, were like, well, we want this to be for the fans and for our community, not necessarily to support one company over another. So what we decided to do in the end was, all of the anime staff said that we weren't going to return and staff an AnimeCon 91. And I think the lack of an anime staff, which is also most of their marketing, combined with the high cost of the convention, pretty much caused AnimeCon 92 to be shut down. And then once we heard that, we started moving to do our own thing. And it was the stupidest move in the world, but I used all of my college tuition as a down payment for the hotel.
Oh my God.
So because you're young and stupid, so I'm like, okay, well, I skip college for a year if I have to. So we put that towards a hotel. And then we start to try to figure out what's a better way to do this. And then we said, well, instead of having conventions own the convention, companies own the convention, wouldn't it be better if we partnered with the companies and they could bring the people related to the products they want to support? Because if all the companies do it, the fans will see more artists and it'll be a win-win across the board. So that's the point in which we kind of reached out to LA Hero and US Renditions and said, hey, we want to do something like this. Can you guys get more heavily involved? And even though you guys were helping in the background with everything with AnimeCon 91, it was still Gainax's,
Right.
event. So, through you guys, we were able to rebuild that corporate and definitely anime guest side, because if we didn't have the support of Bob, Dave, and Ken, then we just would have been, just another fan event happening there. But fortunately, you guys kind of saw the potential in the model. You guys could recognize, that this would be an industry you guys would help to build and, would be major players in. And you guys were also fans.
Right.
So putting that together, when we approached you guys kind of saved us in kind of saying, yes, we've got contacts in Japan, we will bring people over. And then even like Toshi, when Toshi knew of our dilemma, he's like, well, I've got friends in Japan, let me talk to Buichi Terazawa and Junko, and let's see if we can bring someone from here. And we were reaching out through every channel that we had to try to bring in Japanese guests that were at least similar caliber as the guests we had for 91, which was a really high bar to try to match. And so that's the foundation of the transition between 1991 and 1992. And I want to say 1992 was the first convention that we did here that was truly thrown by the fans for the fans. And the other thing to note was we decided to create a new corporation because AnimeCon Corp was a wholly owned for-profit corporation that was heavily owned by Gainax. We said, let's do it as a nonprofit so that there is no stock, so that no one person will own it, so that we can make it, open to everyone. And under the tax laws as a 501c6 mutual benefit corporation, the IRS is going to say no. A company can't just buy you out and start telling you what to do. So if Disney wants to own us, they can't. And so that was the vision that we set in 1992 for what we wanted Anime Expo to be.
Well, thank you for trying to give me credit for Buichi Terasawa, creator Cobra, Kabuto, but that was all Ken. It was through Ken that I got to work on Kabuto and therefore established our relationship, friendship, to Trish actually going to Japan for a year and working for A Girl and all that sorts of thing. All that credit goes to Ken. But thank you for trying to give me the credit. And Mike, just to think, if you hadn't sacrificed your college tuition, Anime Expo would have never happened. So much love and gratitude to you.
Yeah, I didn't know.
I've never heard that story. That's amazing.
You're young, you're stupid, and you think all your ideas are brilliant and they can't fail, right?
Sounds like us.
Well, that's amazing. Yeah, I've never heard that story, or I'd forgotten it. So yeah, Anime Expo 92. I'm looking at the program book. So you did mention the Society for the Promotion of Japanese Animation, the SPJA, was formed, that you founded, Mike. And the companies that sponsored Anime Expo 92 are US Renditions, LA Hero, VIZ, Anime, A.N.I.M.E. who I don't even remember who they are, and Animag. So Toshi, you did something because you guys were a sponsor. So we,
it's not like we gave any money. We just gave free publicity.
Hey, we needed every bit of publicity we could get.
Who was Anime with the dots? I don't remember that company.
That may be Anime, the Berkeley Journal of Japanese Animation.
Maybe.
Yeah, that's who it was.
Yeah,
Okay.
so that was the journal we did at Berkeley, and
okay,
that was what I mentioned earlier. It's the first time that scripts were actually published.
Yeah.
And it was groundbreaking because we found out that scripts are not protected by copyright because that's our interpretation of everything. So we were told we could publish them. So I remember we'd sit in anime screenings and people would hold the scripts and just read line by line every single thing that was happening, and it was a huge hit. And so we published them, the magazine at Berkeley. And funny enough, from what I understood, they caught the university off guard because it was the most successful publication ever in Berkeley history. They actually made money because every university publication loses money because they print them and no one buys them. But we not only printed it and sold out, we got an ISBN number and had to go to second and third editions.
Oh,
so,
wow.
And the good thing was that by doing that, we actually start to build a mailing list that we could use for AX. Because now we had the physical address of fans who didn't necessarily have an email address that we knew how to access. Because when AnimeCon left, we didn't have the contact information because that was protected information that AnimeCon owns. So we had to rebuild our contacts from scratch. So that helped a lot.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, it's You know, it's funny. I hadn't quite remembered how much it was almost like starting over in a way for 92, and how, you know, we all all the companies participated and really tried to step up and do more to support the convention, because we did believe in it. I remember that very vividly. And it was another great guest list. Mikimoto-san returned. One of the big gets, I think, it was Tamino-san. Ken,
Oh.
did you help with that, or?
No, actually, I didn't help on that.
Yeah.
I don't know how. I want to ask Mike, how did you get
How
Tomino-san?
did you get Tamino?
Yeah, because he's not the easiest get.
It may have been through Jan Fraser,
Really?
but it's a little hazy because I remember Fraser was doing like a lot of CG consulting work all over Japan at the time, because computer animation was first coming out. So a lot of the studios were starting to play with it, if anything, just for background work, not for, you know, actual character work. And so there were a lot of meetings where, you know, we were getting introductions to a lot of potential guests. And like I said, we went through every single channel, and then we posted on the internet, hey, you know, we're trying to do this again from scratch. You know, a lot of people go to, a lot of otakus go to Japan to try to work and teach English for a year or two and just get immersed in the culture. And some of them actually do legitimately make contacts. None of them really get jobs as animators or character designers, but some of them do manage to make some contacts. So I think that was one place where we really lucked out. But like I said, the fans were supporting us. Everyone wanted us to succeed. So it's almost like the Judy Garland, Mickey Rooney, you know, let's have a musical. Let's all put this together. And, you know, but that's kind of the spirit we wanted, because if we were a wholly owned corporation that was, you know, supporting one view, would the fans really burn, you know, all that effort to try to save us and help us? And I don't know if they would have, but consistently the fans have always helped us. And, you know, that's why I think, you know, the core of AX is its fandom.
Yeah, and it really started that first year in 92. I mean, I really remember that vibe from 92, just feeling like a community and almost that kind of, you know, family convention vibe where you're with the people you kind of want to be with, and you're all enthused about the same thing. And I remember that very much in 92. So yeah, you put this amazing guest list together, Terasawa-san, Tamino-san, you know, which is just huge. I can't even explain, because, you know, he was and is, you know, the father of Gundam, and getting him, I think, is incredible. In hindsight, I don't think I attended his panel. I wish I had, because we were busy. But Ken, you brought in Mikimoto, and you had at this time started LA Hero, and we were working together, meeting US Renditions and LA Hero on Macross 2, which was a huge deal that there was a sequel to Macross. Now there have been many sequels to Macross since, but that was the first one. And Mikimoto-san returned to do the character designs, and that was a big deal, and that was a big part of 92. Any particular memories of bringing him, or was that difficult, or was he excited to come back?
Well, I think he was very excited to come back, and you know, after seeing from the 91 the popularity of the macros, and you know, like those kind of, you know, like led to new macros franchise, you know. So quickly we made macros 2, and then Kawamori-san said, hey, this is not macros. So it's, you know, you want to make a, you know, then you know, like there's macros plus with Watanabe-san, and then we met like Nobumoto-san writer, and Yoko Kanna's music. Later that's become like Cowboy Bebop team, you know. So it's really, you know, everything kind of connected, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Dave, I remember,
go ahead.
In 92, you know, I wanted to promote like a voice actor, you know, like, so if you remember, like we made a Deborah Singh song for the Macross 2, and we took her to the, you know, Anime Expo and having an autograph and
Oh, I remember. Yeah, we
Big
brought.
voice actor panel.
yeah,
which was
voice actor
all
panel.
USR,
Yeah.
LA Hero voice
Yeah.
actors.
Cool.
Yeah, we brought 15 voice actors, and
That's right, yeah.
I had to moderate the panel with like 15 voice actors, including
Yeah.
the very young Steve Bloom, who's gone
Yep.
on to great fame as
That's
a voice
right, yeah.
actor.
That wasn't what he
Uh,
was called at the con.
Yeah, he was using a different name at the time.
That's right. Yeah.
Did you have the voice actress for Wendy Ryder in that panel too?
No, but because we
He
hadn't
didn't show up
recorded
till
that.
episode 2, and I don't think episode 2 was out yet.
Yeah, that wasn't out yet, so that did not occur at that
Yeah.
time.
But we made like an Anime Expo exclusive packaging, if you remember.
I remember.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no.
Clamshell.
Yeah.
The box for that was really cool.
Yeah. And Dave, I was just going to bring you in to say how big it was that there was a Macross sequel, right? Because for me,
Man.
Macross and Robotech, and again, whether you loved Robotech or we all knew Carl Masick, and there's a tendency to, especially when someone is gone, you try to only focus on the good things. There were times when Carl was very strident in his opinions, and we would all get into arguments. But what he did with Robotech was really key for fandom. I mean, it really brought Macross to the US. It brought a spotlight on Macross, and we all built upon that. But what he did with that deserves a lot of credit. But the fact that there was a Macross sequel that we were handling was a big deal, and people were really excited for that, as I recall.
One thing about Carl, I want to say is that yes, I agree with you 100%. Robotech was a huge turning point. But one of the things that really influenced us, I think, in the beginning dubbing stage of like Macross 2 was the Megazone 23 International Edition dub, aka the Johnny Winters dub that Carl
Hong
did.
Kong dub.
Yeah, it's the one where Shogo's called Johnny Winters. And it wasn't. They anglicized the names and all that, and westernized the names and all that. But there was something about the dubbing, the entertaining aspect, as you said, Toshi, about the dub that I saw. That was kind of an eye opener when he did that one. So that was kind of influential, I think, too.
Yeah, and it just seemed like '92 was really, it all had to be done, as you said, Mike, starting from scratch. But I just felt there was a lot of positivity coming out of the '91 convention, and we were all
100%.
Let's make Anime Expo just as cool and just as successful. And I think my recollections of it are that it was, and Mike, you can tell me what the attendance was like, but it just seemed like it was more of the same, but even better,
Yeah, I think it was about between 1,600 and 2,000 again. Granted, talking to the exhibitors, you didn't have any like beds full of money again. Although, just historically, it sounds like all the exhibitors just made so much, kept making more and more, kept making a ton of money. It's just that as there were more anime conventions happening, that money got divided more and more. Because I think if you had the money and AnimeCon 91 was happening, you were going to fly from wherever in the country you were to come out, because it may not happen again. But this was the first successful partnership, and this grew into partnerships between us and Genion, Pioneer, and all these other companies that were trying to bring in other products and other guests. I'd say that the picture of a super young Ken, me, and Bob Napton, super young.
I don't know why I was wearing suits at Anime Expo.
Yeah, Ken's in a suit. I was holding the mascot, which was a stuffed bear that only Mike can explain why that was.
And the bear had a mohawk because of your T-shirt.
Because of my Black Magic M66 T-shirt. Correct.
Yeah, but that was the first. That was the building of the successful partnerships that would take AX to even where it is today. I mean, granted, the people involved have changed, the companies involved have changed, but it was that underlying philosophy. and the support of the fans that kept it going. And I think that's always been the key to its success.
Yeah, it's really true. And I alluded to this a minute ago, but I really do remember 92 being just this great vibe of like the industry, the fans, and even people in the industry who didn't normally maybe always get along, were kind of getting along, and we were kind of making peace. It was funny because you alluded to the subtitling versus dubbing panel in 1992. And I was young then and kind of a little full of a little more verve. And I decided that was the time that I really needed to debate with Carl Masick about the virtues of dubbing. And, Carl could be very strident in his views and sometimes say things that would touch a nerve. And he did that with me that day. And I remember we had a really heated debate. Robert Woodhead had the best line at the end of that panel because he said, well, I hope you guys enjoyed the dubbing versus dubbing panel. Because the entire panel was me and Carl kind of going at it for about an hour. Kevin Seymour was in the back of the room. He got up and left because I just decided it was my time to take on Carl Masick. I have no idea why. I would apologize to him if he were here. But it's funny though. He came up after that and said, "Hey, I want to tell you." And I was like, "Oh man, he's gonna give it to me." He said, "I want to tell you that what Ken, you said, that we did the specialty packaging that said Anime Expo 1992 on our Macross and Orgus and Guyver videos that we sold exclusively at the convention." He said that was a really smart idea. I really wish I had done that. And it was kind of nice because after this heated debate, he came by and paid a compliment. And that was just kind of the vibe. We all sometimes got into it. We all had, Torin and Kevin would sometimes argue. We were all really passionate about trying to build this industry, in the US. And we saw Anime Expo as really where it could all come together,
But we're all family. Even with all the arguing, we're still part of the same extended fandom family. And that, I think, is a key distinction.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. Any specific memories any of you have of 92 that you would like to share other than I've shared mine?
Only thing that really sticks in my memory is singing karaoke on stage with Buichi Terasawa, with myself and Taka's younger brother Yoshi, who helped on the translations of the Raven Tengu Kabuto anime, and we sang the theme to the Kabuto anime. And that's the only pictures I have that Mike took.
That picture I have of you is in the karaoke room. That's
one of the most vivid memories. And then I wish I had the photo somewhere of Tomino, Terasawa, and Mikimoto holding the Animag logo during opening ceremonies, or with the meet and greet. We had this big foam core logo of Animag, and the three of them holding it. And
I've seen that picture somewhere.
Right?
I don't have that picture, but I know I've seen it somewhere.
I wish I had that photo still. It might be on one of the 3.5-inch floppies that were long since lost to the tides of time. But yeah,
how did you make that happen?
It was basically like they were doing photo ops during the meet the greet guest reception.
Yeah.
And one of the Animag staffers came up to me with a sign saying, "Hey, get them to hold it." And speaking Japanese and having an advantage, I just made my way forward and says, "Hey guys, can you hold this? Okay, take a picture."
Cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was still before my VIZ days. Trish joined VIZ pretty much right after AnimeCon Anime Expo 92. So it was beginning our whole 12-year run at VIZ.
No, and it was, you know, we were fans who became professionals, right? I mean, at least speaking for Toshi, David, and myself, you know, and Ken, I know you love Ultraman. You were, you know, a fan, a fan in your own right in Japan. So, you know, yeah, I mean, I think the fans that helped make the conventions happen, you know, were the fans that became kind of the professionals that helped pave the road, so to speak, for where things are now.
My contribution to AnimeCon, I mean, Anime Expo 92 was the creation of the dubbed Macross 2 Dangai, I mean, Macross 2
Orgus.
And Orgus, right? And so what I can say is that we all, Robert and I and Ken, and you know, we worked really hard to make those as special as we could, and I understand they were very well received at the show.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun to be there. Dave, you had, by the time the show happened, you had an opportunity and you jumped to another job, and you couldn't make it that year, but it was actually quite well received, and we brought the entire cast. And Mikimoto did the cover, the reference guide, which was Ishtar.
Right.
So yeah, it was kind of all Macross 2, it felt like at that moment. And it was kind of, in a way, the culmination of everything that had happened since 1984, 85, at least for you and I, because we kind of met each other because of Macross. And so it was kind of fun to have all that happen.
Right.
I mean, shout out to Ken. He was all in on Macross too. Even
Yeah.
named his daughter Ishtar for his middle name.
Yeah.
She hates that.
Does she?
She hide. Yeah.
I think it's cool.
I thought it was like, man, Ken is in.
Right.
Ken's the man. No, it was exciting. It was fun. And Ken, do you have any other memories of 92? You kind of had to take care of Mikimoto-san, and that was sort of the beginning of when guests would come and they would kind of almost need a handler. You were kind of one of the early handlers.
Well, you know, somebody was mentioning it earlier, but we all went to shooting range. That was 92, right? Yeah, that was fun. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, they all wanted to fire guns when they came to America. So we took Mikimoto-san and a bunch of guests on Sunday to a gun range. It was kind of crazy, but it was fun.
It became a trend to take.
Yeah, become a trend,
Yes,
really trend.
shooting
Yeah.
range. I mean, again, I'm talking out of order and saying 93. I just remember going to the shooting range in Petaluma with the Japanese guests from that year. And we got full automatic weapons. And the Japanese guests were just going crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll talk about how you guys almost died from the
Keita Amemi at the direction of Zayram, the animation, with the
so we'll talk about
machine
that
gun
at
going.
next year's panel.
And then he loses control and fires. It hops out of his hand and he shoots into the air, and we all scatter.
wow.
Oh my gosh.
Worried
Oh my
about
God.
bullets coming down.
I wasn't there for that. I would have remembered that. Wow. Well, Mike, any memories of the guy with the heaviest burden? You were wearing the crown, as it were, in 1992, so it had to have been even more work, even more stress. What are your recollections of?
Well, first of all, I didn't wear the crown back. I think I never wanted the crown as far as wanting to be the Ota King, but I did call myself the busiest anime fan in the United States, and it felt like it in 92. Some key memories. We should do a call out to David Ho and the guys at Running Inc. because they did the opening animation for 1992, and they were inspired by the Daikon opening animation. So they worked closely with the UCLA Cal-Animage chapter, and then they were crowdfunding it and asking people to have donations to make the animation. So shout out to them, and you know, but that kind of embodies the spirit of the fans running the convention. And the other kind of weird memory that I have at that from my notes of that time is you know, you start to have companies doing unusual marketing angles. So before, when we had a relationship with US Renditions and LA Hero, everything was kind of very straightforward, and we're all, you know, everyone's got Japanese DNA in their companies. So, you know, there's a protocol, how we do with business cards. And then that was the year Central Park Media came out, and that was the year that they had Minna Agechao.
Paper panties.
Yes,
I remember that.
exactly. So we're like, oh, okay, this is a sign of things to come. You know, the industry is changing, and there's going to be a very Americanized way as more companies kind of enter the market. And and we did see that the market did start to explode after '92, because we proved there was money to be made there, and a lot of fan-funded companies start to pop up and start competing for rights and licenses.
Yeah, we can never forget John O'Donnell, JOD. He really had a unique perspective, and he really broke open the video market in a way that hadn't been broke open before because of his experience in video distribution. It really was a game changer. And,
right, absolutely. His participation was for sure a game changer.
John and Mike Tatsugawa are two guys who were very present in '92 and very present on the American anime market that we can't forget. Yeah, so I mean, look, I think we're getting close to winding it down. You know, we've covered a lot of ground. I mean, it's, you know, we're not supposed to project too far ahead, but obviously '92 was very successful. It led to '93. The convention, I believe, moved to LA in '94 and has been going strong ever since, growing every year. I took a long break and came back in 2000 or 1999, and there were like 10,000 people, and I couldn't believe it. And you know, just seeing the growth was mind-blowing, and it kind of still is. I mean, I recently went back a couple of years ago with Ken. I got the opportunity to be on a panel with Ken to announce the Gundam live action movie, and at just the scale of Anime Expo, just every time I go, obviously setting aside the last few years because of lockdown, it's just mind-boggling what it's become. And I just guess I want to ask everybody, you know, from the perspective of 1991 and 1992, could you have really imagined where we would be 30 years later? It's kind of where we all thought or hoped we would end up, with anime in the US being a huge business. But it's still kind of hard to believe where it started and where we are now. So I guess, Toshi, you go first. You know,
well, yeah. I mean, obviously, having been an anime fan since right out of high school, having watched, you know, the Speed Racers and the Star Blazers and whatnot, and then asking my parents to bring back some anime tapes, newer anime shows from Japan, and being blown away by Final Yamato, Macross, Do You Remember Love, Nausicaa, which were like the big things back in the mid 80s, and then just falling down that rabbit hole to start Animag, and then eventually go to get to meet creators in Japan. I met Miyazaki in '87. I have a signboard from him, and it sort of set my career path to be able to watch cartoons and read comic books for a living. And here I am 30 years plus later, still watching cartoons for a living. I mean, I get to work on Pokemon episodes. I mean, I authored the first season of Pokemon on DVD when I was at VIZ. Now I'm the producer at Pokemon. So it's a long path. And seeing the industry grow from what it was back in '91, or even earlier at Baycon and whatnot, and San Diego Comic-Con anime rooms, it's the things that we dreamt of is reality. And the fact that I'm still sort of part of it, because Pokemon is sort of anime, but not really treated as such, but I'm still in the industry. So I'm happy to see where it's been. I went to Anime Expo for 17 years straight, and I missed not going to it anymore, because I guess they're on whatever, 30 years now. So I've missed the last 13 years of not being involved, but I'm happy to see it grow to the numbers that it's been. Yeah, I'm proud to have been part of the early years of the industry and of AnimeCon and Anime Expo in the early years.
That's awesome. Well said. Dave, I'm gonna throw it to you. We used to dream big, and here
Man,
we
yeah.
are. And
Yeah.
what's your perspective on where it was and where we are?
Well, where it was, you know, young fans slash, you know, film students who had a dream, which was to bring Japanese animation in the best way possible to the American English speaking audience. I remember, you know, looking at books like Macross Perfect Memory and magazines like New Type and The Anime and Out and Animage, looking at all the cool things that, like they called it road shows, when the anime productions would come out, and then, you know, the actors or the singers, like in Megazone 23, might have a road show, and they would go different places in Japan and do a small performance and interaction with fans. I was so envious of that. Like, couldn't we have that here in the US? And then here we are in 2021, and we have that full-blown concerts. I mean, there's so many technological, innovations have happened since our time. Back in 1991, the internet blew up. Streaming things. I mean, like the fact that you can look at a cell phone. I'm holding my cell phone. I don't know if you can see it on here, but that you can watch anime on a cell phone, like in 4K, is incredible. I mean, I didn't foresee all that. The thing that, I mean, I'll always be, really grateful for the many anime memories that I had during my time at US Renditions. And, back then I hadn't even been to Japan, but me now in 2021, I've been to Japan multiple times. So, I'll share a memory with you. My wife and I were at Tokyo Skytree, and there's a full 1/1 Valkyrie there. And that was like an amazing moment to walk in that room and see that Valkyrie there. It was like, I think, from Frontier. And I was like saying, man, this road has been incredible that I've been on. And I could have never even have imagined that. The one thing I want to say to the new generation of anime fans and the people that are watching this video is try to learn about the early days of anime. Everybody's enjoying it now. It's pretty much taken for granted. But it came on the back, as Mike said, he did, he sacrificed, a lot of his personal time and his money, his future, to help to make AnimeCon and, an Anime Expo happen. And, so many of us, also sacrificed our time and everything too, to make this happen. Just try to learn about the early days of anime and understand that everything has a beginning. And, to appreciate what you have today, you have to understand where things originated from. And I just want to say, to Ken and to Mike and to Toshi and Bob, and, I just want to say thank you for, working with me over all these years. I want to, in the time after I left US Renditions, I was still able to work with Ken at LA Hero with Orgus, and I'll always have, fond memories of that. And, it's kind of emotional, but it's true. I just want to say thank you guys.
Well, we all did it together. That's
Yeah.
the big thing.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. Ken, anything you want to reflect on?
I'm very happy in how the Anime Expo grow, and then all the fans, also industry grow, and now not only United States but anime fan all over the world. So I think that's amazing, and I'm very happy to see that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And Mike, I want to give you the last word. You obviously sacrificed a lot and did a lot to make Anime Expo 92 and AnimeCon 91 happen. Obviously you moved on, as we all did, to different and new ventures and new opportunities. We've all stayed involved in our own way, but you certainly must feel a lot of pride in thinking about what Anime Expo has become and over 100,000 attendees, and just, you know, it's a phenomenon really every time that convention is held in person, which it will be hopefully again soon. So any reflections you want to share?
I remember back in 1992 or 93, I got interviewed and someone was asking me where I wanted Anime Expo to go in the long term. And my response was that eventually I hoped that Anime Expo would close, because the goal that we had was to bring anime to everyone. And once anime became so ubiquitous that it was everywhere, there really wouldn't be a need for a society to promote Japanese animation anymore. But the one thing I didn't think about at the time was that through anime, we've created communities. We've created not just an anime community in general of 100,000 people, but we've created lots of micro communities as well. That, you know, there's a certain beauty to it that when someone dresses like one of the Naruto characters, that if he sees a group of other people dressed in as the other Naruto characters, they'll immediately find somebody that they know they share a passion with. They immediately know they have people that they can talk about things with that they may not be able to talk to other people. And that's kind of amazing when you think about how difficult it is nowadays to kind of, you know, plug in and feel that you belong somewhere. And I think what Anime and Anime Expo have provided, and the reason for its growth, is we've created a community, many communities that people want to belong to and fit in with. And I think that's a fantastic gift that we've given to like the next generation of fans. So I see now why Anime Expo will never go away, because people will always want to connect with other people.
That's a perfect note, I think, to end it on. So I want to thank everyone for their memories, for their time. For
Happy 30th anniversary, Anime.
Happy 30th anniversary, Anime Con 91.
And Expo 92.
Expo 92. Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you again next time.
All righty.
Okay.
So much.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.